What are we discussing on today's Locked On Diamondbacks podcast? We have to talk about that horrendous Torey Lovullo ejection. And can Jordan Montgomery deliver D-backs revenge in game number 2 against the Kansas City Royals?
You are Locked On Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? The always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas, multimedia journalist, and I'm a graphic designer. So please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. This episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your rivals. Check out Booking.com for your stay today. On today's Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, we'll talk about that horrendous Torey Lovullo ejection. Can Monty deliver revenge in game number 2? And we'll talk about the struggling D-backs players since June 29th. Thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms. So please continue to tell your friends. And one of those platforms is YouTube. Please hit subscribe to Locked On Diamondbacks on YouTube. That is not the right transition. All right. Let's get back into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, and let's talk about that game number 1 against the Kansas City Royals, because it obviously did not go the D-backs' way. We know the D-backs struggle in interleague play, and the struggles continued in game number 1 as they went against one of the better teams in the American League, one of the best run differentials in the American League wildcard race, the Kansas City Royals. My dark horse team entering the 2024 season. I like their moves in the offseason, but they're even playing way better than my expectation level that I had for them, even as my dark horse. Bobby Witt Jr., one of the hottest hitters in Major League Baseball right now. He has been crushing it over his last month. He continues to be hot in game number 1 as he was a single away from the cycle. But that is where the story of this game starts, because as Bobby Witt Jr. was trying to go for his cycle, he needed one single in his final at bat to complete the cycle. Humberto Castellanos plucks Bobby Witt, and the tensions flare, right? Salvador Perez starts yapping and barking. What are you doing? That's our best guy. Why are you hitting our best player in a moment where he can go for the cycle? Everyone in Kauffman Stadium is booing the D-backs. I guess they think some nefarious thing is going on. Torey Lovullo's like, oh, put the hit on. We can't let a guy get a cycle against our team when we're down 18 runs. That would be an awful look. You're right. Let's double down on bad looks and go hit their best player. Like, what decision making does that make? Why would Torey Lovullo tell our pitcher to go hit their best guy when we're down so many runs, when we already are losing, and their best guy is a hit away from the cycle? Are we just preventing him from baseball greatness? Like, you think Torey Lovullo is that much of a lowlife where he would be like, hey, make sure that really elite player doesn't have a really special moment early in his career? Like, why would Torey Lovullo do that? It makes absolutely no sense. Like, I think the Royals are being idiots here, thinking that it was something nefarious for Humberto Castellanos to go out there and pluck Bobby Witt. Guess what? Humberto Castellanos, it's just not that good, guys. Let's be honest. Castellanos has never been a good pitcher for the D-backs. He's always struggled with command and throwing too many walks and throwing the ball over the place, and it was not a surprise. Yes, was it unfortunate because it seemed like, oh, all of a sudden, going for the cycle, you're going to hit our best player? Like, I guess there's a level of perception that can make you think that, but when you really start to think about it logically, like, it makes no sense. Castellanos just isn't that guy. We saw him literally the other day against the Cubs walk in the winning run on 5 pitches. Like, Castellanos just does not have good control. And the fact they think Torey Lovullo would tell his pitcher to go out there and hit the best player in a moment where he's going for a cycle, ridiculous. And then the fact that the Royals, the next inning, pluck Gabriel Moreno, maybe you think it was a coincidence and maybe it was a freak accident that happened, but I find it hard to believe that as soon as Bobby Witt gets hit in a moment where you could go for a cycle, Gabriel Moreno, one of the D-backs' best young players, gets plucked the very next inning, and you want me to think it was just a coincidence? No, that's a moment where the pitcher for the Royals and the manager need to be ejected immediately. One or the two, because you cannot have retaliation in baseball. Maybe it was a freak accident, and I'll give them 10% leeway that maybe it was a coincidental accident, but it feels like when your best player gets hit, the whole stadium's booing, your Salvador Perez, the veteran leader on your team, starts barking. It feels like you need to retaliate in that moment, and that's what the Royals did by plucking Gabriel Moreno, and there's no place for that in baseball. The D-backs would not go out there and say intentionally hit one of the rising stars in the game. The D-backs, Torey Lovullo, would just not do that. And for the Royals to go out there and retaliate against Gabriel Moreno, that is a bad look on Major League Baseball. Torey Lovullo should have gone out there and exploded, and I'm glad he did because he needed to say something. The umps did not do their job in that moment. Warnings are not enough. You should give out warnings right after you see Bobby Witt gets punked. That's when the warnings come out because with the Royals, the way that they were feeling in that moment, you knew retaliation was probably going to come. And you have to set that tone as the umpire where you say, if you guys retaliate against Bobby Witt Jr., there will be consequences. That is not what the umpire did because you see it all the time in baseball. One guy gets plunked, and sometimes it is intentional where that first plunk is intentional, but that was not the case last night. But sometimes that first guy gets plunked, and retaliation is coming for the other team. So the umpire puts in warnings automatically where if I see retaliation, it's going to be an automatic ejection because we cannot have that in baseball. I think it was something with the Mets a few years ago. Was it with Terry Collins where his team retaliated and he's like, I can't, it's self-defense, guys. They hit me first. I can't go out there and do something back. Like, what do you guys expect from me? And that was the Royals last night. They felt like something was done to them first, so they responded, and there should never be a response in baseball. The umpires have to set the tone immediately. If they see someone gets plunked and they think it can get out of hand, immediately the next time the opposing team plunks the other, like once it gets flipped and the team that got plunked last time does the plunking this time, that has to be an automatic ejection if you're the umpire. You have to set the tone. You have to say there's no retaliation baseball. And that was a failure of the umpire to let the Royals go out there, plunk Gabriel Moreno Jr., and then Torey Lovullo has to go out there and defend his guy. He gets ejected. I thought it was a bad job by the umpire crew last night to not punish the Royals for retaliating against the D-backs. Instead, the D-backs get punished in that moment. I think it's a terrible look by Major League Baseball. And honestly, the game itself is just something we could throw away. Yulber Diaz, he got last night, was not his best stuff. 7 earned runs in 3 innings, 9 hits. Like, he was not good. Miguel Castro, we know he's still a guy that comes in blowout games. Castro is still not that dude. Castellanos, still not that guy either. The D-backs put in their worst relievers after they saw the game was getting out of hand. That's why I like from Torey Lovullo. Don't waste your good guys. Throw out the Castros when the game is out of hand. D-back since the All-Star break, offense not converting enough opportunities with runners in scoring position. They did it again in game number 1. They have to convert more opportunities. And if the D-backs can do that, they can definitely come back in this series. So the big question is, will the offense step up in game number 2? Will Jordan Montgomery deliver some revenge in game number 2? That's what we'll be discussing in segment number 2. But hey, if you think the D-backs can win this game and this series against the Kansas City Royals, why not place a little wager down on America's #1 sports book, FanDuel, because I love sporting. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games and the sports aren't sporting like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head to fanduel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. This episode of Locked On Diamondbacks is brought to you by Booking.com. Yeah. With summer travel heating up, especially travel for baseball games, it's time to explore those U.S. cities you always want to learn secretly more about. Yes, we're talking about your rival cities with hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com. You might just find your perfect stay even in your baseball rival city. From hotels that look over stadiums to a family friendly resort, Booking.com has so many choices across the U.S. for your summer travel this MLB season. Can't deny, I've already done some traveling through Booking.com. Checked out Petco Park in San Diego, a little Dodger Stadium in LA. Go to Booking.com and plan your stay. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your rivals. Book today on Booking.com, on the site, or in the Booking.com app. All right. Let's get back into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. Let's talk about game number 2 for the D-backs because the D-backs are looking to get some revenge in that game. And we looks like potentially we're going to have the return of a Jordan Montgomery to the D-backs rotation in game number 2. The question is, how healthy will Jordan Montgomery be? Will there be a pitch count on him? A little, load management going on with Jordan Montgomery because we saw this with Zach Gallen where he came back off the injured list and the D-backs were like, we're not going to throw in more than like 75 pitches, right? I think the D-backs that first time off the injured list I think they like to be cautious with their players, especially their pitchers. So Jordan Montgomery in game number 1, even if he's cooking and efficient, I wouldn't expect him to pitch deep into the ball game because I think the D-backs are going to try and not put too much on his plate. Make sure he comes out of game number 1 healthy and get him going to the next game. Really just build up confidence and build up the strength in his body. So for Jordan Montgomery, we're looking for him to deliver a clean start, but maybe not a deep start in game number 2 against the D-backs. And Jordan Montgomery is a major wild card piece for this D-backs team in the second half of the season because, again, if you can get the guy that we've seen the last 3 years where every year since 2021, he lowered his ERA, got better through more innings pitched in the season, and just got more competent as a pitcher every single season since 2021 to the point where he was probably the best pitcher in a rotation that won the World Series just this past season. So we have a lot of stock in Jordan Montgomery. There is a lot of pressure on him. The highest paid player on this D-backs team coming off the World Series, like expectations were high for Jordan Montgomery when the D-backs signed him. He has been awful since coming over to Arizona. He has been Madison Bumgarner bad, which is sad to say, but you look at the numbers. The first 9 starts for Madison Bumgarner, 6.48 ERA, and then you go to the first 3 starts of 2021 because Jordan Montgomery at this point has made 13 starts. So if you take the 9 starts of Mad Bum's first year in 2020 plus the first 4 starts in 2021 for Mad Bum, he's probably got like an 8 ERA. It's pretty bad, but Jordan Montgomery through 13 starts, 6.44 ERA. So he's trying to do his best Madison Bumgarner impression, and he's just a little off. No one can do the Mad Bum like Mad Bum, but Monty has been very close this season. And if the D-backs want to win the World Series, I think they have a squad that could get back to the World Series if everything breaks right. But they want to win the World Series. One of their biggest issues last year was they just did not have that rotation depth. You had Gallen and Kelly, who were fantastic, but Fott as your number 3 as a rookie. You liked him. He stepped up in a big way in the postseason, but you were never going to pitch Fott deep into ball games. You still had issues with him when it came to the long ball, that second, third time through the lineup. So you felt like if you could get 4 2/3, 5 innings out of Brandon Fott, you felt golden. And then, of course, once you got to that 4th starter, it was a bullpen day for the D-backs in the postseason. Well, now Fott, I think you trust him mightily. He stepped up in a big way. He's my number 3 starter right now for the D-backs entering the postseason. You go Gallen, you go Kelly, you go Fott. But then, so it's the same top 3 as last year. But then that number 4, if you can have the Jordan Montgomery that we saw last year, or at least any of the Jordan Montgomerys that we saw the last 3 years, that's your number 4 starter in the rotation. Like, that's a major game changer for a playoff team because most playoff teams do not have a guy as good as Jordan Montgomery as their number 4 starter. That's why he's such a game changer in the second half, such a big wild card piece, because if you can get back to the guy that we've seen the last 3 years, he is a major needle mover in this rotation, along with an Erod. If one of those two guys can hit, because I'm confident in the Gallen Kelly five, 1, 2, 3. You only need four dudes for a rotation in the postseason. So at this point, we're just needing either Monty or Erod to hit. And Monty's back first. Erod may not come back until August. So great opportunity for Monty to build his postseason rotation case if he can get back to the guy that we've seen the last 3 years. And if we continue to see the guy that's resembling Madison Bumgarner, yeah, Monty might not be there then when it's time to do playoff rotations, because we cannot have that guy in a postseason setting with the way Monty's pitching right now. He is just not good enough. Then the offense in game number two could honestly use a feel good performance, because the offense since the All-Star break, I don't think it's been bad, but it hasn't been great. That finale against the Cubs, of course, you get shut out. Game number one against the Royals, you just don't do enough. Not the D-backs issue right now since the All-Star break, it just feels like they're not capitalizing on enough opportunities. Feels like they're getting opportunities, right? 10 chances with runners in scoring position in game number one against the Royals, which was even two more than the Royals had, but they were 2 for 10 with runners in scoring position. That feels like the problem for the D-backs since the All-Star break. It feels like they're leaving too many men on base, and I think the D-backs need to have a feel-good offense performance, because their offense just hasn't been it hasn't felt alive enough since the All-Star break, and I could use a nice 6, 7 run performance from the D-backs to make them feel good. Going against an Alec Marsh, who's been fine this season, but not exactly elite. There's an opportunity there for the D-backs to really explode. I am curious with the righty Marsh on the mound. Gurriel has been struggling over the last couple weeks. I wonder if this is a Lourdes Gurriel rest day for the D-backs. Maybe go McCarthy, Thomas, Carroll, go with three lefties in the outfield with a righty on the mound and Gurriel struggling. I would not be surprised if this was a Lourdes Gurriel rest day. Should have the D-backs bullpen fully loaded, probably minus Justin Martinez, because he's been pitching a ton in the past week, but Ginkel, Thompson, Seawald, that top three should be good to go. And for the Royals, I think the best way to stop them is just make sure they don't play their brand of baseball, which is small ball. The Royals, like we were talking about in yesterday's podcast, very reminiscent of the 2023 D-backs. They're number one in like extra base taken percentage and run scoring percentage and productive outs and sacrifice hits. And in game number one, the Royals really didn't even need to play that brand of baseball, because they were just crushing it against D-backs pitchers. Exit velo was super high. They were hitting home runs. Like, the Royals in game number one did not have to do the small ball. So if they start doing that in game number two with the performance that they showed us in game number one, like, the offense could get pretty scary for the Royals pretty quick. So make sure you cut out their brand of baseball. Don't let them kill you on the bases. Don't let them create havoc. And like with a guy like Gabriel Moreno, like, I can see why they're trying to pluck him, because he is the best catcher in baseball at not allowing the small ball chaos on the bases. He's throwing out guys. He's keeping guys at first by throwing it down the line at times. Like, yeah, if you're the Royals, the guy that I would want most out of the D-backs lineup is probably Gabriel Moreno, because if he's out, then that unlocks everything for what Kansas City wants to do. So not surprised at all that they targeted Moreno in that situation, but I think the D-backs have a really good chance to bounce back in game number two. They haven't lost a series in a month. The last time was late June against the Minnesota Twins. So I think the D-backs have a lot of confidence that they're going to bounce back in game number two. But to do that, they're going to need some guys who have been struggling since June 29th to step up. And we'll talk about those struggling players in segment number three. Hey, if you need any parts for your vehicle, then I suggest eBay Motors, because passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. And also, if you want to check out America's #1 daily fantasy sports app, then I suggest Prize Picks because with over 5 million active members, it is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stats projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the Prize Picks community today. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. Prize Picks is available in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONLB on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right. Let's get back into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Now let's talk about some players that have been struggling since June 29th because we've talked about it. The D-backs have been arguably the best team in baseball since then. I haven't exactly checked their overall team rankings since June 29th, but prior to their game #1 against Kansas City, they were #1 in winning percentage, I think tied, #1 in runs scored. Like all the metrics said, this D-backs team was arguably the best in baseball since June 29th. Our offense has been killing it. Our pitching has been very strong. Like there's a lot of areas that are working for the D-backs right now. They've been scoring early, clutch situations. You gotten some great contributions from your rotation. Some guys in the bullpen have stepped up. Like it's been a real complete team effort since June 29th, where we've seen the D-backs play some of their best baseball against some tough opponents, right? The Padres, the Dodgers, the Braves. The D-backs have looked really good over the last 2.5 weeks. But that's from a team perspective. There are still some individual players who have not been on the bandwagon for the D-backs during this whole little stretch that they got going on. There are some players who have been struggling for the D-backs recently during this stretch since June 29th. I want to talk about a couple of those players that we would like to see step up for the D-backs who have not been, good enough recently for the D-backs, and we could use a little bit more flair from. Just some of these players just need to contribute just a little bit more because the D-backs are getting a lot of contributions from a bunch of different guys. But if some of these guys can start to get going, that just, of course, raises the ceiling of this D-backs team a little bit higher. Maybe they could get going in this series against Kansas City and really start to get their second half going because a guy like Lourdes Gurriel, who we've talked about, had an incredible month of June. Since then has kind of struggled. You look at his numbers since June 29th, and Gurriel is back to struggling for the D-backs. His WRC plus is only a 61, which is not very good, guys, right? 61. The average for WRC plus is 100. So if you're at a 61, that means you're quite below average as a player right now in Major League Baseball. And Gurriel is a guy that plays almost every single day. He has had a ton of at bats during this stretch. He is the second most at bats for the D-backs since June 29th. That's why I think today could be a great rest day for Lourdes Gurriel. He's been struggling. We need him to get back in that groove. He crushed it in the month of June. RBI producer. The swing was starting to look back. His numbers are starting to get back to where they were for most of his time with the D-backs. If Gurriel can get back to swing the ball that we saw, get back to swing the bat that we saw in the month of June, that raises the ceiling of this D-backs team. What, tenfold? I don't know how much you want to multiply it by, but you get elite Lourdes Gurriel in your lineup. All of a sudden, your ceiling of your lineup raises so much because we've seen Gurriel the month of June. D-backs look a lot better when Gurriel's crushing it. Look at the first half of the D-backs last year when Gurriel was an all-star. D-backs offense was crushing it. So we need elite Gurriel back for this D-backs offense to continue to look elite because they've looked fantastic since June 29th. Sub Gurriel. So if you can add Gurriel into the mix, crazy offense now by the D-backs. Can also say the same with the shortstop position because it has not been very good since June 29th. Geraldo Perdomo, his WRC plus is an 80, but he has not provided any sort of power and he's not getting on base enough. Like 308 OBP since the 29th, 339 slugging. We know he's a great tone setter for the D backs at the bottom of the lineup, but last year his walk rate, one of the best in Major League Baseball. That's what made him so strong. That plate discipline. Right now, his walk rate since June 29th, he is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He is ninth on this D-backs team in walk rate since June 29th. He needs to be better in that area. He's the tone setter for the D-backs. He's the guy with elite plate discipline, and when he's getting on base via the walk, that's when it trickles down to the rest of this D-back squad. So need a more patient Geraldo Perdomo. I think defensively he's been so important during this stretch. I think he's had some really clutch moments, but overall offensive consistency could use a little bit more from Perdomo. Same with his other counterpart at shortstop. Kevin Newman has kind of been in the tank since June 29th. He has the worst WRC plus on the team during that stretch of only a 55. His OBP is actually 250 during that time. We need a better Kevin Newman. He actually hasn't been striking out a ton. Strikeouts are not Newman's problem. It's just the fact he doesn't draw enough walks, doesn't get on base enough. And if the D-backs can get their shortstop position going a little bit, I don't think you need Blaze Alexander right now, but Domo and Kevin Newman could definitely use a little bit more juice because the D-backs are not getting enough from their shortstop. D-backs get a little bit more from their corner outfielders, Lord Gurriel, of course, Corbin Carroll. We can always use more from. I know we've seen him hit a bunch of home runs the last like 13 games or so, but still, since June 29th, Corbin Carroll, 190 average since the 29th, a 97 WRC plus. The only reason his WRC plus is almost 100 is because of that 444 slugging. He has 4 home runs, second most on the team since June 29th. That is the only reason Corbin Carroll's numbers look almost decent. Like he's still considered a below average major leaguer, but the fact that his WRC plus is even 97 is only because of the 4 home runs he's hit since June 29th. Carroll, he starts to tap into the power, but overall, offensive consistency still not there for Carroll. 190 average since the 29th. He needs to be better. And if the D-backs can get their corner outfielders going, get their shortstop going, hopefully in this series against the Kansas City Royals, that's only going to increase their offensive ceiling so much more for the rest of the season. And if the D-backs can get a full, complete effort from their lineup, this is the best offense in the National League going to the second half of the season. Now, that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Doses.